This job has been really helpful in my life to learn not to take things personally because I know I've learned online I cannot take things personally. And it has been one of the greatest lessons of my life. Very little few things bother me now. I'm like, everything that happens, I'm like, I know this is a you thing, not a me thing. And I just kind of like let it go, let it slide off of me. And that lesson came from social.
Welcome to Actualize, a podcast focused on the intersection of performance, ambition, and mental health. I'm your host, Rob Pintwala. My goal for the show is to not only celebrate success, but also shed light on the challenges and sacrifices that come with ambition. Actualize is brought to you by First Session. Launched in 2019, I started First Session to help you find the right therapist. First Session is purposely designed more like a dating website than a clinical website, as we're completely focused on helping you find the right fit the first time. My team and I interview and vet our partner therapists, so you can simply browse videos, see who you vibe with, and instantly book a session. Check us out at firstsession.com and see why more than 7,000 Canadians have chosen First Session to find a therapist. In today's episode, I interview Alessia Scauzillo, also known by her influencer and fitness name, Alessia Sculpt. Alessia's got an inspirational story. She graduated McGill's business program at the very top of her class, and then quickly started climbing the corporate finance ladder. After years of working heads down for two different leading finance firms, she started a side gig teaching fitness classes around Toronto. She loved it so much that she later built up the courage to quit her job and build a fitness and content creation business full-time. There was many bumps in the road along the way. In this episode, we go deep on many things. We cover the passing of Alessia's mother 1 year before she graduated university, her separation after a 12-year relationship, and strategies for maintaining her mental health while being an influencer, and now her calling to be a leader to inspire women by taking risks and following their dreams. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Alessia. Hey, Alessia, thank you so much for joining me today on Actualize. I wanted to start with just jumping in, and you can tell us a little bit about your career transition and what that looked like.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to chat. I started my career in finance. So I went to McGill University. I studied business there, and I really went like a traditional path. I worked at an accounting firm for 3 years, PwC. I got my CPA, CA, and then leaving there, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I knew I loved working with clients and working on a bunch of different deals and projects. So I actually went into corporate banking at RBC, and I was there for about 5 or 6 years. And it was a very intense place. I was on an amazing career trajectory. I was doing well. I was getting promoted. The work was very interesting, but it was super stressful. It was deals based. So it'd be like a deal would drop and, you'd drop everything that you were working on and you would focus on it. And it was like a tight timeline and all of that. And I was working for someone that was not very nice, quite toxic. And I kept thinking this is the path I should be on. I studied for this. I worked for this. I'm doing well and this is what I should stick to. But there was something inside me that was nagging at me that was like, this is not it for me. I know that there's more. I could be happier. Was I okay? Yes. Was I was doing well? Yes. What could I be happier in my life? Could I feel more fulfilled? Yes, for sure. And throughout my entire career, I had been working out. I was into fitness. I would work out first thing in the morning because I knew that if I saved it till later in the day, something would go awry with work and I would have to skip it. So I was working out just as for my own mental health. It gave me the energy and the confidence and the strength that I needed to get through my days. But there reached a point in my finance career when I was at RBC where I was like, I am so unhappy. I'd come home from work one too many times crying. And I was like, I feel like I need to try something different. And I didn't know what it was. But I was like, while I figure that out, why don't I teach some workouts part-time on the side just for fun, for something else to do for something to put my mind toward, my energy toward. And so I got certified and I started doing that and I loved it so, so much. But I also was realizing how little I was getting paid in fitness, teaching fitness classes, like, at a studio in Toronto. It was like
Yeah.
I was thinking about that recently. There was, like, a tier. It's like if your class was not that full, like, say, half full, you'd get $35 for the class, and if you maxed out the class, you'd get 50, and so you would have to teach a lot of
Wow.
classes to do well. Yeah, like, to
I've
even
always wondered
survive.
that.
Sorry?
I've always wondered the
Yeah.
economics of that.
So that was
Interesting.
in 2019. So maybe it's different now. Probably not because COVID really hurt a lot of studios, but it was brutal. So I was working finance full time and teaching fitness on the side. And I started to think about like, I love this. How can I turn this into something bigger? And so I saw like a couple people, big people in the space doing the online thing. Like this was early days, pre-COVID. Like no one was really doing it except for a handful of people who
Mhm.
had that foresight. And I was like, and I had a business background. I was like, this is it. I need a subscription model. I need to get online. I need to put workouts on there. And so I started building it in 2019. And then when COVID hit, I had been planning to launch 3 weeks later. For like the 6 months leading up, I had been planning to launch 3 weeks into COVID. And so when COVID hit, I was so ready and I launched my online fitness business. And then I worked on that with my full time job. I had already been doing it right for about a year teaching in person in Toronto. And then I did the online thing while working my full time job for another year. And then I ultimately left. So I left my finance, very stable, very secure job to be a full time fitness professional and a content creator influencer. That part of my business was starting to pick up too. And it's interesting. People always ask me, like, how did you start becoming an influencer? And it really started because I wanted people to come to my classes in person. And I was like, if I don't have a social media presence, no one's going to come to my classes. That is why my Instagram handle is Alessia Sculpt because my last name is Scauzillo. So I wanted people to type Alessia SC and be able to find me without like my actual last name being out there because I was still working in finance. So it was really just to drive people to my classes. And then I started to really enjoy being a content creator and sharing my life online. I've kind of always done that. I've always been like a big sharer with
Mm.
my friends and with the people around me. Like when I love something, I like rave about it. And so I started sharing my life. And right around the time that I launched my online fitness business in COVID was when my influencing kind of started to pick up. And now I do that full time.
Wild. Wild journey. You mentioned in there that when you were in finance still, like something was kind of nagging at you. Like how long was that nagging happening for?
Years because
What did it like what did it feel like? Did it like
it,
get more intense or
yeah. So it was there honestly almost from the beginning when I started working at PwC, but I thought that it was like when I was at PwC, I thought it was maybe a certain project I was on at PwC. And then I'd switch the project and I'd be like, it's still there. Okay. So maybe it's actually PwC. So then I left and I went to this other job. And then it was there. And then I thought, well, maybe it's just the toxic boss who was not great and didn't definitely made it worse. But then I switched to another role within RBC because I was in like a corporate banking general role. And then I switched to a real estate position. And then it was still there. So it's like it was this thing that was always there that I realized it wasn't the job, it wasn't the company. It was like it was all of that. Like it was just this was not my purpose in life. It felt that's a really good question. What did that feel like? It felt hard to like do the things I needed to do. And I'm not sure I recognized that at the time, but now doing my work that I do now, I feel so in flow. It often doesn't feel like work. I'm just like so aligned and like in it. And it's like suddenly it's 4 o'clock and the day's almost over. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it just everything flows so well. And when I look back at that time, it felt so difficult. Like I had to really muster up the energy to do anything. And, I was able to do it. And actually, that skill has served me well now because I can still do, when I don't have the energy, I can still like force myself to do things, which was my entire last year, 2022. I was going through a lot of personal things, which we can talk about. And I didn't have energy at all. But I feel like I have this deep sense of like, will and like discipline from those finance days to force myself to just do whatever I need to do. But now it flows and it didn't then. And I felt like I was meant for more. I looked at the people above me in the bank and I I was so sad for them. Like speaking so honestly, I was like, they don't take care of themselves, like, physically, and they don't make time for their bodies, like, no workouts, they don't eat well, they kinda just, like, eat whatever's around, like, like Chinese food for lunch, like, 5 days a week where, like, you hit that lull in the afternoon when you do that, and they're sleepy, and they're having 3 coffees a day to get through, etcetera. They don't see their families or their kids often, and I just kept, like I kept looking at them being like, this isn't me. Like, I care about myself. I care about my body. I care about living like my absolute best life. And staying on this path does not feel like that. It feels like conventional and expected, but it doesn't feel like me.
Yeah. You're selling the banks real well.
Kind of. Look, some people, I say this all the time, some people are meant for that life. Like, some people are meant to be employees. They're meant to wake up, do what they're told, make a lot of money, and go home and, go see their family for an hour before bed, hit 2 vacations a year. Like, you know what I mean? Like more conventional life. Some people want that. And I wish, this is the funny thing. I wish I wanted that, because if I wanted that, I could be making so much money right now. I'd be happy. I'd be like, I'd be like, it would have been enough for me, but
Mhm.
it's not enough for me, and sometimes I struggle with that because it's hard. It's hard for the conventional to not be enough and to figure out what is enough and then be brave enough to go for it.
Yeah, well said. I think so for any of the listeners, we went to the same program at McGill, so
Yeah,
sort of
that's
knew
good
each other.
good
Yeah.
context. We know each other.
Um,
We studied. You were in finance or accounting too,
yeah.
right? But we just knew each other
Y
from, like, not
yeah,
accounting.
exactly, but I definitely just recall you as being, like, someone who, like, had their shit together.
Yeah, thanks.
And I felt like I didn't at all.
I
And,
did. I did, which
still
is
don't.
I did have my shit together, and I still do, but I think that's what shocked so many people about my career change, because I think from the
Right,
outside, it looked like I was, like, so had it together.
right. I guess my question on that topic is, like, where did that sort of direction come from, like, even back in, university when you were sort of on that track, got into accounting right away, did all your CPA stuff? Like, is that a family pressure? Is that just some pressure that you put on yourself? Um,
A mix of both.
finance or money
Yeah,
driven?
a mix of both. I think it started with my family. My mom, who passed away, which is also a big part of my story. She passed away while we were at McGill, actually, in between 3rd and 4th year. She was super strict, had the highest of standards for me, and was on me at all times. I think she saw my potential and she wanted to make sure that I got there and didn't fall short of that. And then that has since translated onto into me putting a lot of pressure on myself. Like, I have always needed and wanted to be the best. Like, I don't know if you remember this, but I graduated number 1 in our class at McGill.
Wow.
And
I didn't
yeah.
I wasn't at the graduation.
True,
That's
fair.
amazing, congrats.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I did, but the funny thing is I did that, and I got some scholarship money from it, and I used it to backpack through Europe for 3 months. And that's
Wow.
always been my personality. I always worked hard and played harder, but I did work super, super hard. So I think the pressure my mom put on me translated into me putting that pressure on myself, and I kept that going for years after school, because I feel like you do school, you do high school, and then you get into school, university, and then you do your post grad or whatever, which for me was kind of like getting my CPA and working at PwC, and then you get one job and then another job and another job. And I feel like you put one foot in front of the other for so many years. And then it's only like a few years out of that, usually around like late 20s in people's Saturn return, if you're kind of like awake enough to get there, is when you're like, wait a second, do I even want to be on this path? Like, I'm able to do it, but do I want it? And that's what happened to me. Have you heard of this Saturn return thing?
I haven't actually heard that. No, I've heard similar concepts. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's like around 27, 30 when a lot people make a lot of big shifts and transitions in their
Mhm.
life, and I made all of mine in that time. Yeah.
When your mom passed away, were you like still just so focused on achieving, or like what happened then, like between third and fourth year? So you were like more than halfway done school.
Yeah. I had a summer internship with PwC that summer in Toronto. She died in June, and I was on week 3 of the internship, and I didn't go back for the entire rest of the summer. I basically was just, like, in the grief, and they were very supportive of that. They were like, "You don't have to come back. We'll still have you like, we like you. We want you back full time after school. So take this summer to grieve, to do your thing, and then come back after." And so I really did take the summer to slow down and be with my family and grieve. But I think because I didn't work that summer, I felt insecure about that full-time position starting after school that I worked really hard in my last year. Like, when a lot of people would typically, like, they already have their job secured, they're kinda, like, slowing down, they're
Right.
like, "It's the last year, whatever." I kinda, like, doubled down on
Did
that
you almost
year.
feel like you
Yeah.
needed to like reciprocate their generosity from PwC? Like,
Yeah, exactly, which in hindsight, I didn't have to do that. I was one of 100 new people, didn't matter, like, who cares? Like, they my mom died, like, it's a big life event, and, like, they would have
yeah,
kept that position open for me regardless, but I felt indebted to them, honestly, because they
yeah.
they didn't have to give me a whole summer off, and they did anyways, and I was really grateful, so I felt indebted, and so, yeah, I really doubled down in that 4th year. And that then translated into those years at PwC and those years after. I worked so, so, so hard. It took me many years after my mom died to kinda, like, decompress and feel safe enough in my body and my life to, like, even process the grief of losing her. I feel like I only really processed it last year because then after I was at RBC, I started my own business, and as you know, the first few years of starting your own business are so chaotic, and it's like you're just building, 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 and you're working so hard, and you're just so in it, and it was only last year when that kinda settled and I felt safe enough in my career, in my life, and everything that all that stuff, the grief came up to the surface
Wow.
with my mom, and I worked through it last year, which coincidentally was at the same time as my divorce.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Yeah.
And that's like 10 years later
Yeah.
after your mom?
Ele Now 11, so yeah, last 10 years. Mm. Yeah.
And maybe just one more question about that sort of grief. I've never experienced a loss such as that. However, I've heard that people say that grief is different for everyone. Like, what do you think about that? Did you have anyone with a shared experience to console with in that sort of 10-year period? Or like, was it you just had to make time for it, or did it just come up when it needed to come up?
It came up when it needed to come up because I distracted for a really long time. The grief was very present for the first few years with my family, first, like, year or 2, and then it kind of everyone kinda, like, moved on, and at the surface on the surface, at least. And then I actually had, like, 7 more people in my family die in between my mom and me. But I'm not gonna hold anything back and just sort of, like, put it out there. And so it kind of and then and people really like, my cousin, who I was really, really, really close with, was one of those people, grandparents, like, kinda all that.
Wow.
And then it kinda just became like, "Oh, another one. Oh, another one. Oh, another one." And so I feel like we kinda became numb a little bit, and then last year, when I was going through my divorce separation and then ultimately divorce, that was like a new and different kind of grief because for the first time in my life, I was like choosing it instead of people dying and it happening to me. I was actually the one saying goodbye. And so the grief, I feel like, hit me in a different way with my breakup. And then it opened up the floodgates to feel the grief from like losing my mom.
Wow.
Yeah, so and at the time, it was so hard, but now, like, looking back, I'm like, I'm a different person than I was, like, a year or 2 ago. Like, my heart is so much more open, I have so much more empathy, so much more compassion, and I feel like I live so much more in the moment and present than I was. I feel like I used to always be rushing somewhere, and I still kind of am, but I definitely sense a shift in me where the priority is now to be happy. It's not like I've slowed down a little bit in work. I've slowed down in so many areas of my life because I'm like, where am I going? Like, the time is now. Like, I just want to be happy. I don't need to be always on to the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. You did mention purpose earlier, and did that sort of come up with all of this grief
For sure.
accumulating?
For sure.
And was that, like a separate discovery even, or was it to just make way for that too?
I've really been thinking about purpose a lot lately because for the last few years, I've thought my purpose was to support women in feeling their best selves physically and mentally and inspire them through my workouts and through my wellness content. After going through a divorce, I think my purpose is much bigger than that. I think it's and going through the career shift, I think my purpose has evolved into I'll be the first one to do something that most people are not brave enough to do. So I shifted careers. I left my stable job and started my own business kind of earlier than most people, and since then I've seen some people do it, but I was definitely one of the first out of like my network at least, and still one of the only. I I got married, fairly young, and then I went through a divorce. I'm the first of my friends to go through it and the first of, you know, to talk about it really openly on social media that I've
Mhm.
seen. And then the fitness stuff that I just mentioned. I feel like, yeah, my purpose has evolved into I'll be brave enough to go first and I'll talk about it, whatever it is, and then I'll hopefully I'll inspire other people to do the same or follow their own path, like whatever it is. And I think that takes a lot of bravery and that takes a lot of like confidence. And I feel like I'll work on that myself so that I can do that for other people and be that, like, kinda leader, role model, or whatever it is. And don't mean to, like I don't mean to, like, toot my own horn saying I'm a leader, I'm a role model. But I think it's very hard, I find, to be first in these things and then, like, talk about it on social media. Like,
No,
my
it's badass.
it's
That's
hard.
amazing.
Announcing my
I
divorce, I'm sorry, I'm 31 years old, and been with my partner for 12 years, and I adored him, and then announcing our divorce, like, that was so fucking hard, but then I got, hundreds, if not thousands of messages from people about how that, like, changed their it inspired them in some way. I'm like, "Okay, well, it's worth it then."
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking I was imagining you getting
Yeah, I did.
lots of notes. Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Do you do you feel like I've had this sort of question with some other folks with like large followings before? Are you feeling any sort of, now that you're like a couple years into more of like the kind of influencer side of things, are you feeling any sort of obligation to show up and like always be open and vulnerable and always be on? Or
Yeah.
how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, for sure. I do feel this like sense of responsibility to my community to show up no matter what. Last year, when it was like the hardest year, again, last year was the year I was going through my separation and divorce. I was really stressed and depressed for most of the year, and I had to show up anyways. And otherwise, because this is how I make money and this is my full time job. And if I'm not engaging with my community, then I can't support myself. And that became even scarier when I became single and didn't have my ex's, full time salary to like help compensate my lower months or whatever it was. But I also in that time had to establish like a boundary on what showing up means. And for me, it means not sharing what I'm going through in real time, but giving myself the opportunity to go through it behind the scenes and still be showing up on social, but not talking about that thing that's happening in that moment. And then once I've had enough time to process it myself, then yeah, I want to share it with my community because it's something, so whatever it is, career or personal or whatever, it's something meaningful for me that I think I often can find a way to like help people learn from it, from having gone through it myself. So there's usually like this time delay. So like, I was going through the separation last year. I only announced it on social in February, end of February of this year, because I needed that time. Like by the time I announce on social, I'm generally like okay with what I'm talking about. And that's the only reason I can talk about it, because otherwise I can get so emotional and it's just like, it's too much. I can't see things clearly. So that boundary has been very helpful for me. And while I'm going through it and still showing up, I'm more creating content like out of like routine. Like it's that deep discipline that I have from my finance days where I'm like sharing, like 4 wellness tips for your morning or 4 workout moves for this, that kind of more like run of the mill, like wellness, fitnessy content that
Yeah.
I don't need my deep creative energy to like do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when I'm ready to talk about something, I come out and I talk about it and I share very openly about it. So when I shared about my separation, I did this video. And then that was, I mean, we can just talk about it because I feel like I brought it up because it's been the biggest, most meaningful thing that's happened in my life in the last while. But I knew that I wanted to share something because I live my life online, and I was married, and to then like to not share that I'm no longer married felt weird. So if I
Mhm.
had to share something, I was like, I feel like this is an opportunity to be inspiring in some way because our separation was so amicable and I am thriving so much more. And it wasn't out of a desperate state. It was out of both of us choosing to like a different life path. And so I feel like if I'm going to say something, I better make it inspiring, or else like, what's the point? So then I shared this video about us that was basically that. It was like we're choosing ourselves. We're both going in our own directions, and like that's okay. And then I shared a bunch of content on how I got to that place, like my healing tips, which I'm sure you asked me about, like therapy and mushrooms and all this
Mhm.
stuff. And so once I'm in a place to go there, I'll like really go there. I have to be ready, and it takes me some time.
Yeah, I was it pays to have a finance background when then you become a content creator, eh? You just have all the strategy in place.
Yeah,
Not other content creators don't have the luxury of being so disciplined.
it's true. I think so much of what I learned in finance, I use every single day. Like and the biggest thing being, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. Because every day in finance, I had no clue what I was doing, and I would figure it out. And now I still, that's running your own business. I feel like is every day not knowing what you're doing, but you're just like, okay, I'll figure it out. And then
A
yeah,
lot of
this
it sounds sorry, yeah, a lot of it sounds almost like you're almost similar like pattern recognition, like you're recognizing the opportunities as they happen to you and as you see your community respond to them.
yeah,
It sounds like, and you're just choosing whatever sort of path aligns with you, which is really inspirational. It's like
yeah,
you can be whatever type of content creator you want, but you're going to do it this way.
yes, totally. And when I'm deciding it, I tune into myself a lot. I've gotten like much more in touch with my intuition. And if something doesn't feel right, I don't talk about it. And if something feels right, I talk about it a ton. And I try not to yeah, I try and tune in and try not to force to talk about something too early or anything like that. Like I really am like, okay, like I tune into my heart, like, okay, am I going to do this? All right, now I'm ready. This is how I'm going to talk about it. This is all the content I'm going to do around it. And I'm going to stay close to my community in that and get that feedback so that I can like adjust.
Wow.
And that feedback loop is something I learned in finance for sure. Like, always asking your boss for feedback on so you can course correct and such. Like
Yeah.
I do that all the time with my community now. I read all the DMs, I read all the comments, and I can't always respond, but because there's a lot of them, it gets overwhelming. But I definitely am like in that feedback loop so that I can create the content that I want to and that people want.
Yeah. I imagine you didn't get the tuning in part from finance.
No.
Where did that come from and how did you learn that skill?
I think it's been a journey in the last few years. Well, it started with the career shift where I felt that nagging for so long, but it was only when things got so bad that I made the shift. now I'm trying to like tune in before things get so off that I
Mhm.
catch it earlier, and then I can really course correct sooner. Like I'm trying to not let things get terrible before I make a move, you know? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, not I mean, I have someone close to me who I feel like is struggling in their career and is noticing things they've never noticed before with their physical health and things like that as well. Yeah, it's
totally.
been interesting and to try to support them from afar, but
Well, I think when
I think it hit that point recently where they had to make a move. Like
yeah.
they had no other choice. And like, was that similar to what happened to you?
Well, I think the universe like sends you nudges, and if you don't listen, which I haven't, sometimes I take a long time to listen, and I think a lot of people don't listen, then it sends you like stronger and stronger and stronger signals. And then it's like you almost have no choice but to listen. And for me, that this year, a really obvious example has been I've gotten into 2 car accidents this year, and I've gotten concussions. And they both came at a time where I was going like a mile a minute. Like I was like running around in 2 different reasons. In January, I was in an Uber and I got hit by a car. Not by neither of them were my fault. Like I got hit both times.
Oh no.
Yeah, and anyways, I feel like the universe was nudging, 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 and then it was like I needed this like big thing to happen to like really listen. And so I'm trying to like I'm trying to catch myself before I get to those extremes. And there's like big things that happen, but it's hard. It's hard because you kind of just get used to going.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it sounds different for every person to tune in. I think it's definitely a skill that I'm still working on.
Same.
Um, Difficult to slow down and being able to do that in like mid step, slow down and then like put your business hat on. Like that sounds like an incredible skill to hone in. And the combination of like showing up with vulnerability on social media, which, I think is kind of a known thing where like, well, I was sort of told again by, Jillian Harris, who I interviewed before, like the more you're vulnerable, the more people are like into it, and it's like this kind of recurring cycle. Like, do you find that?
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's it's interesting because yes, the more vulnerable you are, the more people relate and the more into it they are. But you can't be too vulnerable and all too much too often because then it loses its meaning, like significance or how meaningful it is. And then so then I kind of err on the side of like, pulling back after I've been really vulnerable, but then that's what people want. And it's this weird like how much to share, how much to keep, and how often to do it. Definitely when I'm vulnerable, that's the most engagement I get. Anytime I share anything about my divorce, about my body and like body struggles, that content does the best, but I don't want to talk about that all. It's very exhausting to talk about that all the time. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's a balance, you know? Like I know
yeah,
people want to hear it and I know it does well, but fuck, like I don't like well, it's heavy stuff, you know?
yeah. I mean, you see folks that are like they built their brand around that type of conversation. That's
Oh,
all they do,
yeah.
right? I can't even imagine what that would be like to
Agreed.
literally
Like
talk about your body every single day,
s-
every single post.
someone like the Bird's Papaya is her entire platform's around that, and then people pick you apart so much, like, it's exhausting. You have to really be, like, willing to put yourself out there, and with it comes so much criticism, and that's something we haven't
Yeah,
talked about yet, but, like,
let's talk about that.
when I posted my video reel announcing my divorce, the first 2 weeks, it had a few 100,000 views, and everyone was really supportive. After that, it went viral and it has 1.5 million views, and I got ripped apart. Like, you deserve to die. You're going to be single forever. No one's ever going to love you again. You're going to be alone. It's going to be like you and your cat, like your cats that I don't have. But it was fully like, I think someone said, I have a gun so I can shoot people like you. Like, it was just like so bad. And it really affected me at first. And then it got there was just such a volume that I kind of just had to stop looking and like let it go and like let the video just be, and I'll let them engage with themselves and keep the video going, and honestly, whatever.
How did you pull out of that?
I
Tell
stopped.
me about
I
that. Like, and
literally,
the initial, like,
yeah,
obviously there was a shock, but like, what happened after that?
I was really devastated because it wasn't true, and I was like, these people, these are people that don't follow me because now the video's gone viral. It's hitting all these other people. They don't know me, and I was so devastated that that's what they were getting from it. And then I had to think about advice someone gave me last year. Actually, one of the people that run this mushroom retreat I go to, anyways, it's a husband and wife. He had said to me in a different context, well, is it true what they're saying? And this wasn't related to the video, but I thought about it in the context of the video. And I just was like, I knew the things people were saying weren't true. Okay. And like, it was as simple as that. It was like, well, are they true? And I was like, well, no. And it's like, okay, then why does it matter? And at that point was when I stopped look. I was like, okay, well, if they're not true, then I have to stop looking at them because they're bothering me. So I changed the filter on my like notifications where comments didn't show up anymore. And I just stopped looking and I just let the video go. And I was like, well, I just have to continue living my life. And the people that matter to me and my community and my followers and my friends and my family, they know the truth. And also, the other person who this video is about, which was my ex, he knows the truth. And that's all that matters. And so fuck everyone else. I just had to like put my foot down like that.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Have you
Stop.
had to do that again with any other posts? Like, even if it's a smaller volume of
Yeah.
haters?
Yeah, definitely. The posts after that, there was a few about like how I've been getting through my heartbreak and those kind of things. It was all related to that. And then sometimes when I post like body posts, I get some comments, usually a couple different kinds of comments. One is from men being like, you're fat or something like this. And usually those are like so ridiculous that I'm like, okay, whatever. And then sometimes from women being like, well, you're skinny, so you can't talk about your body. Because I feel like people think that because I lost a lot of weight last year when I was going through the divorce, and I've gained a bunch of it back. And I think people think that if you're not like a very large person, you can't talk about your body. But in my opinion, if your body has fluctuated a lot, then I'm okay to talk about that. But I think sometimes people tell me I can't. And then it's like, well, this is my social media platform. I'm talking relative. I'm still in a smaller body, but I've definitely gained weight since I haven't been as stressed. And by the way, my message is that's a good thing because I lost weight from stress and now I'm like normal, like eating normally, working out normally, and like have gained it back. So like that's actually a positive thing and a message that I try and share with people. So I think I just know like there's always going to be someone that has something to say negative about my content. It's like, okay, block, delete. At first, block, delete is my first instinct. And then it's like, you know what? Just let them say whatever and like let it make the video do better and move on to the next video the next day. Like every day is a new piece of content, like move on.
Wow, that must be really hard. I'm sure a lot of people can't do that.
I think so yeah, the last thing I'll say about that is actually this job has been really helpful in my life to learn not to take things personally because I know I've learned online I cannot take things personally, and it has been one of the greatest lessons of my life to not take things personally in my real life too, not just online. And not very little few things bother me now. I'm like everything that happens, I'm like I know this is a you thing, not a me thing. And I just kind of like let it go, let it slide off of me. And that lesson came from social.
I like that approach. Yeah, I think it, it seems like the biggest haters, assuming they're real people
Yeah. Oh, these
behind
were,
those accounts.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, it was probably a mix of real and fake, but the messages were so specific that
right.
they must have been
Yeah.
real.
It's like, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. If you're, really judgmental towards other people, it's just such a quick indication of how you treat yourself.
Yeah.
It's sad, really, at the
Yeah,
end of the day.
it is.
Well, good for you to step away from that. You mentioned the mushroom retreat. Is there anything, was there any cool experiences that happened there?
Yeah, I have been doing a lot of like, not a lot, but a good amount of like heavy doses of mushrooms in my healing journey the last year and a half. Side by side with therapy. So I've been going to therapy like once or twice a week for, yeah, a year and a half. Now it's more like once every 3, 4 weeks. But therapy is what got me through like the really hard times. And then coupled with the mushroom retreat, it's this one where we do mushroom like a ceremonial setting. And I've had some really meaningful experiences. I think the biggest one that came from therapy and mushrooms was whichever way I go in my life, no matter what I do, I'm going to be okay no matter what. And I think for a long time, I struggled with that. Like going into fitness from finance, I was like, I'm not going to have the salary. I'm not going to, but it's like, then all these opportunities opened up in this content creator fitness life. And then with my divorce, it was like I thought I wasn't going to be okay if I wasn't with my ex, but like now my life has opened up in a million ways that I couldn't have expected and I'm fine. So that was a really big lesson that I saw clearly in my mushroom journeys. And then the biggest one though was like moving through the pain of losing my mom. That all really came up in the mushroom journeys and like specifically understanding firsthand and like seeing my mom in those mushroom journeys that she did the best that she could. 'Cause she put a lot of pressure on me and she was very hard on me, but she did the best that she could. And like forgiving myself for what I didn't do right in that relationship and forgiving her for what she didn't do right in that relationship. And unfortunately, she passed away. Like we really butt heads when we were teenagers or when I was a teenager. And unfortunately, she passed away kind of like before the shift of like me becoming an adult and us having the opportunity to become close. Like I was 20 years old when she died. So we never really had that opportunity. We just like really butt heads when I was 16, 17, 18, and like forgiving each other for that. And not just like talking about it in therapy. Like I think in therapy, which I needed to talk about it for sure. And I've talked through so many things in therapy, but I think there's a difference and they help each other to talk through something in therapy where rationally you talk through it, you hear the therapist say it, you say it, okay. But then to like be in the mushroom ceremony and be on mushrooms and actually be sitting side by side with my mom in the experience in this like other like galaxy that I went to and talking to her and going through that forgiveness like both ways, like that really like accelerated my healing journey where maybe if I hadn't have done that, it would have taken another year, 2 years of therapy to like fully get there. And I was like healed from it in like a few mushroom ceremonies. Yeah.
No, it's super beautiful how you talk about that and the closure, and even just like hearing your tone, even just talking about it, you sound very, together, which is amazing. And yeah, I'm a advocate for, different types of healing and doing a lot of exploration myself, and even first session might have some psychedelic assisted stuff at some point soon. So yeah, yeah.
I haven't been back since December of last year because I feel like I did so much, and sometimes it's like enough with the work. Like last year, I did so much like work in quotes, like, going through the breakup and this therapy and the mushrooms and the reading and the meditating and the journaling. And like, oh, I was just like, come January, I was like exhausted and I needed a break. And now I'm kind of like, okay, I could dip my toes into some more work and maybe doing it from a place of like, not needing it like I did last year, but, like, wanting to, like, push forward more. That's where I'm going now is, like, maybe I could make this fun. Maybe I
Mhm.
don't have to be,
Mhm.
like, so sad. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. I think a lot of folks, that's where like the real magic almost can happen, right? And that, like, speaking of purpose and alignment and that sort of thing. And I'm, personally, I'm actually kind of seeking that out a little bit more now, but with a lot more patience and intention around, like, you know, where you go and who you connect with and what's your intention of the
Mhm.
work. And I think that's like really powerful. And to be able to like
Mhm.
have the stillness to be able to approach it like that. And a bunch of therapists that I've talked to have really talked about the benefits of like the one person gave it like a zero, like a -10 to +10 scale, and said like most folks come into therapy like some
Mhm.
negative number and they sort of just want to get back to zero. And but there's a huge
Right.
opportunity from like the 0 to +10 side,
Right.
which I think a lot of folks don't think about naturally. But and again, it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be therapy; it can be different types of work. Or that's amazing. Yeah. No, thanks for sharing all that. I mean, I guess one. one question around, you know, to use a finance term, how did you sort of like think about that long relationship at, kind of this, critical age if anyone, not even, I shouldn't even say that. Like that's just an age that is getting closer to what a lot of people may think of being like family time, like family starting time. If that's something that you were even interested in, like, was that a factor that you had to like
Yeah.
weigh and like yeah, the word I was gonna use is, like,
Yeah.
sunk cost, like, I think a lot of people stay in a relationship because of the already, invested effort that's been in there.
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of fears about that, about having spent so much time with this person and then approaching an age where if I wanna have kids, like, I kind of have to do it in the next, like, few years. I had a lot of stress and I felt a lot of pressure around that, and my therapist was the one who helped me realize, like, you putting this pressure on yourself about that, how is that helping you?" Like, in fact, it was making me so paralyzed about the decision that it was actually making it worse. Not only was it not helping, it was actually making it worse because the pressure was making it harder to decide. So I had to take all that out and tell myself that, like, if I want a family, I'm gonna make that happen however I can, and, it's gonna whatever my path is gonna be is how it's gonna be, and if that means if I end this relationship and I meet someone at 35 and I'm able to have a family, I'm 32 for context, I'm able to have a family naturally, then great. If that means I'm 38 and I am single and I really want a family, then I will make that happen for myself in a different non-traditional way. But it's like this thing of like people think about life like, I don't wanna give up what I have now because I wanna have kids and I'm looking people look so forward into that perfect life or that perfect trajectory, but your whole life is a series of nows. And if you're not happy right now, what are you waiting for to be happy later? Even if you had a family, then you're not gonna be happy then. Like, it's like taking all that, like, future and past out and being like, "What is gonna make me happy right now?" Because every moment you're alive is the now that you're living in that you have to be happy in. So shifting my think those it's really hard. I don't even know if I'm explaining that right, but, like or, like, well enough. Yeah. It's like taking the past and the future out of it and not waiting to be happy for any like, even with my ex, it was like, "Well, he's such an amazing person. He's in 10 years, what if I regret not being with him in 10 years?" It's like, but what about all the minutes leading up to the 10 years from now? I have to be happy. Like, what am I waiting for? So taking the pressure off and focusing on the present moment and doing what I feel in my gut to be right in that moment and how you tune into that is like you said it before, the stillness element. Like getting still enough and taking enough space to even realize what makes you happy in this present moment.
Hard
No,
not too many
but
people are
the
slowing
slowing
down too
yeah, I
frequently
mean,
these
same.
days,
It's so ridiculous. I'm
including
sitting here right now
myself.
about to tell you that what got me to the place of knowing I needed to be alone is my daily meditation on top of my therapy and mushrooms. And yet, for the last several months, I've resisted my meditation. I, like, do it sometimes, I don't it's like, I literally know that it's the most important
Mhm.
thing to get still for 10 minutes a day even, and yet I'm still resisting it, like, I even have to tell myself. But what kept coming up last year was, like, "You need to be alone, you need to be al" it didn't even have anything to do with my ex, he was a wonderful, wonderful person, wish him all the best. You might have known him, he went to McGill, I don't know if you know that, but great person, still in
Mm.
touch, wish him so well. It wasn't even about him. It was like, I need to be alone, I need to be alone, and it always would come up in my meditations. And I wouldn't if I didn't get still, I wouldn't have known that, and
Wow.
who knows where I would be right now.
Thank you for sharing that. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it is yeah, it just what keeps coming back for me is, like, the kind of discipline that you approach your, like, own kind of transformation and healing with is, like, really, really
Thank you.
inspiring,
I
and I
appreciate
see
that.
why so many people are inspired by it. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's like the rigor that you put into your career is, like, now into yourself. It's
Well,
like, wow.
now that you say that, I'm like, "Thank you," and I'm like, maybe, that's such a great point, but it's also like, isn't that the best place to put it in? I actually feel inspired to, like, double down on it even. So I'm like,
I
"Okay."
I
Like,
think
I would
so.
rather put that time and energy and rigor and discipline into myself versus anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think about that a lot. I mean, I started a business trying to connect people with therapists, so
Finding a therapist is very hard. I get asked all the time. And actually, I should give your business as a recommendation because one of the recommendations I have is my friend and podcast host, like one of my good friends and podcast hosts, Lindsay from We Met at Acme. She has this like online therapy tool where it's sorted by location and it's therapist vetted by other people. And I always say that, but then you still have to it's vetted by people who've submitted it, but you're not matched with someone. You still need to like find your person. And so, yeah, it would be great to give your business also as a
yeah,
recommended tool.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, only if it's good enough, if only if it fits your bar, but I don't even like the word match in the verb sense sometimes because
Mm.
I believe that people need to choose who they wanna work with, so it's like, if you're given one choice, that's not a choice, like, if you're just like, "Oh, this is the right person for you," because a lot of these algorithms don't work
Right.
based on what you actually need. They're like, "Who's available?" Like,
Right.
who do we need to fill for our business to work, right? But I think that the choice is, like actually has been proven that the relationship between you and your
Hmm.
therapist is the most important thing above all anything else. So it's like that quality of the fit. And I think that's why it's so exhausting because like people are seeking that fit and they
It
try
does.
but it takes a ton of investment
It's
to
very,
assess, right? And you don't necessarily know that for a while. So that's why I literally interview therapists on camera and it's like a more of like a dating website than
yeah.
a
Well, I was literally about to say, and I was telling this to someone last night on the phone. I feel like finding a quality therapist is like dating. Like a lot of the times you meet someone and they're pretty good, they're good on paper. What they do is like they kind of fits and you think you like them, but then when you meet someone you really like, you know. And I feel like that's like a therapist, like the person I was talking to last night, someone important to me in my life. They were like, "Yeah, like my therapist is pretty good. He meets the qualifications. I feel good. I don't feel great." But it's like if he were to have a therapist that he really fit with, I feel like you would feel that. And I feel that way about my therapist, where I feel like, okay, she's that person for me. It's kind of like dating. You think, I don't know. I don't know if like this makes sense, but you kind of are like, yeah, I like this person. They seem pretty good. But then when you meet someone you really like, you're like, oh no, I really like this person.
well said. No, I actually think that, the service that we provide, it's actually
Yeah,
more often than not helping people decide who's not a fit than who is a fit. There's definitely still some personal connection needed to
right.
actually assess that. But like what people can really do is be like, no, 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 no. Sound like my toddler saying that, but um, yeah, yeah. And it can be like, I mean, just the if you face too many no's, then you're gonna give up, unfortunately. So, and that's a huge time investment, often a money investment, and that's why we've designed it like we have. So, I have a question actually. I mean, now in particular, like, so you run your own business. I imagine you don't have like RBC or PWC level benefits for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, for in terms of insurance and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
what do you like, so obviously you've invested a lot financially, even when you started a new business and like, didn't have the same kind of cash flow coming into your personal growth. Like, how do you think about that? When people will stop, going to therapy or stop, whatever, going to physiotherapy or
Yeah, and I really don't have benefits now because I'm not on my ex's like when I left my full-time job, I still was able to join my ex's plans, and so his benefits and his salary kind of like helped, in those like early days. Now I'm really on my own. I don't have any of that. I don't have any benefits at all. And so I try and invest in the things that I know are like really moving the needle for me. And so that is number 1 without a doubt therapy. And then I try and save in other areas like the meditation I use an app where like the cost per use is like very low because I have like an annual membership. I got it on a deal, et cetera, et cetera. But I really I really try and prioritize the things that I know make me feel my best over anything else. And I will say, like, as an influencer, like, the cost of living is pretty low as an influencer because people think you get free things and, like, you kinda do, but you don't because most people get paid in dollars, like, most people get paid in their jobs in a salary. I get paid a lot of the times, not in money, but in gifting and exchange, and so I would prefer to get paid in cash, but a lot of the times, I get paid in exchange, especially with small businesses, and so some stuff will be, like so my cost of living is pretty low, so I'm fortunate enough that I can invest in things like therapy even though I don't have benefits. But like most people who have a salary have benefits that go unused. And that's just like, oh, I encourage everyone to like really make the most of it. Even if you don't think, I think a lot of people think that they don't need therapy. Like you said, like they're at a zero and everything's like going pretty fine. They're not sure what they would talk about in a therapy session. Like every time I go to therapy, I'm like, what am I going to talk about today? There is always something to talk about to like make my life better. And so even if you think you don't have anything to talk about, like try it and like just make the most of the benefits that you have, or at least the ones that you know are going to move the needle.
Totally. Yeah, I think if I often don't have anything to talk about as well, but I think if
Yeah.
you have the right fit in a therapist, like they're going to
Yeah.
help you bring up what's the most important thing to talk about. And most people don't start, a lot of people don't start therapy.
Just go in there and they'll ask if it's a good therapist, they'll ask questions. And suddenly it's been 60 minutes and I'm like haven't shut up and I'm like, "Oh, I guess I did have something to talk about." But the on the influencer thing, it's like it's so interesting. I think being
Yeah.
an influencer is so glamorized and in so many ways like it is like, you get invited to events and you get like gifts and all these things, but there's really no other job in the world where 99% of the work you do is unpaid. Like, every day influencers put out content, and 99% of the time, or maybe it's like ranges between 90% and 99% of the time, you literally don't get paid for your job. And then sometimes when you get paid, it's like in a gift in like products, and you're like, I can't pay my bills with products. I need money. And so it's much harder to make money as an influencer than I think people think. And it's like this weird, there's a there it's the job that there's the biggest difference, in my opinion, that I've experienced. There's the biggest difference between what it looks like and what it is, I think. And actually, the easier it looks, the harder it is on the back end. Like if something looks like it's so easy and an influencer is making it look so easy and streamlined and natural, I actually think it's harder to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, I wanted to kind of guide the conversation here before we wrap up, but I know that there's so many people sort of toying with like being a, influencer, like, whether that's even just like putting themselves out there kind of thing with like photos or, being glued to your phone. Do you get like other kind of aspirational influencers like messaging you and asking you for like advice or anything like that? Or like what would you
Yeah.
say to people who are, you know,
It's harder than it
like I guess you
looks.
just kind of
Yeah,
said it, like it's harder, and before you mentioned about like the negative comments, and I was very impressed with how you managed to shut that out.
for
I mean, I'm
sure.
sure sometimes it creeps back into your mental space, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I
It's
couldn't do that.
I know, and I've had people say to me a lot, like, "I couldn't do what you do." Like, it would give me so much anxiety to, like, constantly be putting my life out there and constantly be worried about what people are gonna say. But I also, I think about how much I am impacting people, and I know that because people send me really personal messages all the time about, like, how my content has, like, inspired them in whatever way, or at my events. I have a lot of, like, in-person events, and people come, and I always give people a hug when they arrive and, like, say, "Welcome, like, so nice to meet you," and they're like, "While I have you, I just wanted to let you know, like, your content, like," even I don't always comment on it, but I see it, especially, the body videos or the breakup videos, and I really has changed my life, like, and I just really thank you for being so open. So, like, that kind of feedback makes it worth the difficulty of putting yourself out there every single day. And then I also tell people, like, is I'm putting my personal life definitely on display, but it's also a job. And so the content, like, I think about it as like being consistent. So, like, not putting any too much emphasis on any one piece of content, It's like, okay, if this content did amazing, great. The next day I put out a new video and maybe it's related to that video sort of, or maybe it's different. Or this piece of content absolutely flopped. Okay, well, the next day I'm putting out a new video anyways. So, like, not focusing on the performance of any one thing in particular, like noting it and taking it as feedback and like adjusting and course correcting, but not putting so much emphasis and like personal value on the performance of any piece of content. And instead just being like, okay, well, this is a job, 5 days a week. I put out a video. Tomorrow's another video. And that's how I treat it. Like I used to try and post when engagement was higher, like at night around dinner time, say like people are more like on their phones after dinner. And I used to try and like finagle that. And at a certain point I was like, no, this is my full-time job. Therefore I will treat it like that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I post every day or in the morning or at lunch. Weekends, I don't post unless something creative comes to me and I really want to get it out. Fine. But that boundary has helped me like separate myself, Alessia, from like Alessia Sculpt. And I do tell some of the people that are closest to me, quite honestly, like in dating, I tell people like, don't look at my Instagram because you're getting like the work version of me. Like it's me, but it's the work version of me. You know what I mean? Like I have this weird job where everyone's watching when I do a
Hmm.
presentation in quotes, like, we'll post a video or do a live or do a workout, whatever. It's like, what other person, like when my friends who work in private equity do a presentation at their job, their entire network isn't watching. But for me, they are. And it's like, so it could be so weird. So like in dating, I tell people like, don't look and some people will say like, yeah, some people will understand and be like, yeah, I don't want, that's your work. And some people are like, "What? That's," they don't really understand the influencer world or even my family. Like I say to my family sometimes, like, this is not the me that you know. Like, this is work me. So like separating that a little bit.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think many people think about that who are
No, like
browsing, on Instagram or
for,
whatever else. Like it's
yeah, for
like,
when I first,
these people
one more thing I'll say is like when I first kind of became an
have
influencer the
lives
first
as
while, when
well.
I would see my friends, they wouldn't ask me how I was doing ever. Like they'd never be like for a good year or two, it was never like, "How are you doing? What have you been up to?" And I was always like, "Do they not care?" Like I was really confused by it. And then I realized they think they know because they're following along. But it's like that's 5 minutes total of my entire day on story or reel. It's like, and also I usually am posting like a day late or like, I'm not always like I'm trying to be present in the moment. So it's like explaining to my friends and family and people I'm dating, etc., that like it's not my exact real life. It's like a part of me thing. Yeah.
That's amazing. I feel like you can start an agency.
Someone or at least a consulting like offering because I have this skill set that's like a combination of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
creative and influencer world, but also like the business background that like very few people have. And I've been toying with it a little bit. Actually, some small businesses in Toronto have reached out to me about it. Businesses that like I've worked with lightly, like for example, one like resort kind of place that offered me to come and shoot content there. And then I was just chatting with the owners, like, say, and of course, because I'm an influencer, like I can just see things that like maybe they could do in their content or how they're approaching things. And we're just chatting and I'm giving them tips. And like then the next day they come over by like when I was still at the resort and they're like, actually, we want to hire you because we realized that you have the value. But I need to decide like what direction I want to take my business in. And is that worth my time? Or is it more worth my time to like really zero in and like double down on like Alessia Sculpt as a brand. So I'm still kind of like working through that, but I definitely think that there are some unique things that I've learned and like I have a unique perspective blending those two worlds together.
100%. No, I think would be a really valuable conversation for anyone considering the influencer life to listen to. I just see your frameworks of how you even handle some of this stuff and if you're going to post something vulnerable, waiting before you post it until you processed it, until
Thank
you've
you.
gotten over it. Like that's amazing. That's a good tip. Cool. Yeah, is there any other parting words? I definitely want to shout out where people can find you. But before we do that, any other words of wisdom for the aspiring influencers or
Yeah.
just people who are really hating their jobs and might have some of that
Yeah.
nagging
I mean, I've
happening,
been
but
there
aren't
and
quite
it's really
listening to
tough.
it.
And what I would say is like, don't ignore those feelings. And it doesn't have to be like quit your job today, but like start slowing down and tuning in and like listening to what those nudges are. And one step at a time, you'll get to where you're supposed to go. But the first step is to just like get still enough to even like feel that those things are happening and to trust yourself enough to figure it out one step at a time. You don't have to have it all figured out, but you will. Like you'll look back, like I look back now over the last like 4 years of my life. Like I started this whole fitness journey in end of 2018 and launched my business in 2019. And like I feel like every day I don't really know what I'm doing. Like every day is like, have I done anything? Have I made progress? But then when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, like whoa, okay, like I've made so much progress. I turned my whole career of something out of nothing. But it doesn't feel like that in the moment. So like trust yourself enough to just like take it one day at a time and like you'll get there.
That's great
Mm-hmm.
advice. I can
Yes,
also relate
right.
to that. I have the same feeling all the time. Well, okay. Well, thank you. Yeah. Where can people follow
Yeah, so
along?
I'm at Alessia Sculpt on Instagram and on TikTok. And then my online fitness platform is asculptbody.com. And it's a online like Pilates inspired low impact workout fitness platform. I have over 300 videos. Some of them are body weight, some of them are lightweights, heavyweights, bands, like cardio, like all different workouts. And they range from like 10 to 50 minutes. And so I have a 7-day free trial for that. So you can just go to my site, so asculptbody.com, and sign up for that. Then I have like a weekly and monthly calendar that you can follow. So you can just open it up and click play and know exactly what workout you're doing. So I would love to have some of you guys try my workouts. Thank you so much for having me.
Love it. Okay. Great time to wrap it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Actualize podcast. You can find the show notes for this episode, as well as all other episodes, at firstsession.com/podcast. If you like this podcast, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.